Sorry, I was running a little late.
Oh, you're good, buddy.
I got caught up in the middle of Dan texted me on Facebook Messenger to tell me that I won the pick'ems this week, and I was in the middle of trying to decide which picture to send. I
Yeah,
got 14. I got 14.
that ain't bad. How's everybody doing tonight? We're just sharing. We'll be right with you once this timer runs out. Hope everybody had a good New Year and Christmas. How was your New Year's, David?
It was all right. Yeah, we played. The kids were all excited because we taught them how to play poker, and in the process of teaching them how to play poker, we used real chips. I got a chip set,
Yeah,
and man, you'd have thought they was losing real money. Oh, we
that's
made them
fun.
buy back in. When they buy back in, they had to do some chore.
That's great. What's up, Ron? How you doing, buddy? Yeah, I feel you, buddy. I feel you. I'm right there. Saturday after that call.
Don't get
Who's
started in
going?
advance. By the way, you don't know how to spell Tuesday on your post. It's got two S's.
Is it really?
Yeah. Fourth and Goal podcast. Tazuza Day. Spectacular. Oh boy.
I'm going to fix that right now.
Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to the Fourth and Goal Sports Podcast. Along with my buddy Christopher Serra Jr. We've missed you the last week or so, and we've got a whole lot to talk about tonight. So let's begin with Chris as he lays the law down on the penalty Saturday night.
Position we were at the end of the game. The numbers, formation. He couldn't even be eligible anyway. So that's what's just bonkers and blows my mind with that call. Other than that, I liked what I seen from the Lions. They showed Saturday night that they can hang out with hang with anybody in the league. Defense played awesome to even give us a chance to come back. So other than that, that's all I really got to say.
Okay, as the impartial observer here, I will say Detroit won the game. Okay. Detroit won the game. They, obviously won the game. And the fact that, you guys got robbed. This is not the first time. And this crew, this is not the first time they've screwed a team. And I sent a message to you earlier on Facebook, where Dean Blandino, the former vice president of officials for the NFL, who's now with the USFL XFL, which is the new UFL league, which we may talk about briefly. He knows all the rules, and he said flatly that Detroit tried to confuse the Cowboys with who was eligible, and they ended up confusing the referees instead. That the play should have been fine, that they won the game because they talk about it. The referees meet up with the coaches an hour and a half before the game. Two two refs go and talk to one coach, and two refs go and talk to another coach. Then they get together and discuss all of the possibilities of trick plays, fake punts, anything that they should be on the lookout for in advance of the game so that, they're not surprised. So they knew this play could possibly happen. It's one excuse after another. On the broadcast, I think even the guy that was in the booth was confused about what was going on because he said that it was an illegal formation.
Yeah.
I have the pictures, okay, of the formation. The only that's the illegal formation, but I don't know, is there another guy on the further outside? I don't see in the picture because they're focused on the line that was on the line because that's only, 10, 11.
We lost David. Give him back. Give him a minute, guys. But no, exactly what he's saying. The deal is, the guy in the booth that said it was a legal formation. Decker was being covered up, and there's multiple calls, but that wasn't the case. If you look, Reynolds is actually lined up to the left of him. He is back off the line of scrimmage, 2 steps away from the line. He also cuts and is gone by the time Decker releases anyway. So he's not being covered up. But now the guy that he claims, number 70, reported, he claims that he reported. Well, guess what? He can't. He's covered up by a tackle because he's playing guard. There's also St. Brown on the outside of Penny Swoole. So that dude can't even be eligible to begin with. It's just own up to it at this point. That might have been the worst call I've ever seen all time. Let's see what's going on with the comments. I'll go through these while I'm waiting for David. He'll be back in a minute. He's just rebooting. Yes, this is the crew, Ron, that is getting, yeah. Ron says this is the crew that's getting Saturday's game, so punishes what? They shouldn't even be doing a game this weekend. I know that's not possible, but main Saturday game. I'm sorry, but my faith in this league with this game I love is finally a total doubt. I mean, I'm glad you actually bring this up because I don't think the league is rigged. I as I'm waiting for David, I wanted to bring it up with him, but I'll get his input when he gets back here. I was watching Pat McGaffrey show today. I got off around 3. And I was kind of watching, because I knew this topic on this show, this is how I was going to kick off the show. It's the biggest news of the week. So, like he said, you got people that are not paid full time. Like he said, he's got mad at these refs that he's literally looked up. What do these refs do in the off season? Are they reffing in the off season? And like he said, he goes, you got refs there like little middle school teachers in the off season. They're not reffing games. They're working jobs, like being a middle school teacher. working at factories, so and so, sports stores. And then in the fall, their football season, they're a pro ref. Now, think about it. NFL's always changing calls, changing plays, altering this, altering that. So you have people that have a whole different career. Some of them have a whole different career um, away from football in the offseason. And then they're doing these games in the fall. Like, is that really enough time for these? You know what I mean? And then you're putting people in the moments, the biggest games. Like they broke it down to like brackets. Like when it comes to the playoffs, you could have crews that might be like 7, 8, 10, 11. Which how much crews they have in the league. You can have some of these low end refs. Lower they go, less games they actually ref. And you could have some of these lower end crews, in the conference championship. Like, do you really want your 7th crew or your 8th crew refs coach one of the biggest games of the year? Like, can you trust those guys? You know what I mean? Like, to top 4 crews, their top 6 should be the only ones doing playoffs. And like Aaron Rodgers was saying, a lot of it too on the show. These players, they know who the players, the coaches, they know who the good crews are and the good refs. Like, yeah, of course they're going to make a mistake. That's a human. It happens. It's a human thing. We all understand that. But for the majority of it is they get the calls right. Those should be the crews that are doing the biggest games of the year. Like, Detroit and Dallas for the number 1 seed on the line and the number 2. Not a crew that's been on watch all year for making horrible calls. This ain't the first game they've butchered. You know what I'm saying? And that's what it's come down to. And like he bring up like a sweet thing. And I'll just think of this. He said, what if you hire full-time refs and then you make a bracket like okay, you put them in training completely. So if this crew and these refs are making bad calls, you could completely send them down back to training and be like, Jim's crew over here has been really busting butt, working their ass off. Let them have a couple games to see how they do. You know what I mean? Like a full-time training program. You could set off. NFL would be able to set up off-season games, like Pete. You know what I mean? All around different states. Different leagues in the off-season. Man, who knows? Maybe work out a deal with the USFL or something. That USL runs in summer. XFL. You know what I mean? Work with these leagues. There's plenty of ways you could do this with players and refs. You can make it where they can have games in the off season to keep their skills up and be ready for the regular season. You could have every ref from your senior veteran refs to the young refs on your roster. They're working for you already in game shape. Everything mentally is there. They're ready. And when the moment comes, they're going to know they have a better chance to deal with those calls and those big game moments. I mean, I think that's they make it a lot of sense. I like the idea because I don't see how you fix it. I don't, without making full-time refs. Because it's like anything, like these players. You think if football only paid you this much, and then they had to go work a regular job to support their family when they're not playing. You think these guys are going to play at these elite levels and be as good as they are to this day? No, I don't think there's no way. You know what I mean? So it's if the players are working all year round, the coaches are working all year round, prepping for the seasons. Think about how better the officiating would be if they're consistently working to get better as the game gets better. Every year, what do we hear? Oh, well, they're going to focus on this, this, and this, and this. And then they're going to call these calls, but then the calls last year they focused on go out the window because now they're focused, they have a whole new agenda because working 6 months, not working 6 months, doing two different, some of them not even doing what they do that pays them most of their money for the year. They're not even ready for. To me, it's messed up. Ron says, I want to believe it's not rigged, and I've always said that. But after Saturday, this is where we need to talk about gambling. Listen, I don't think the sports are rigged. But I'm not going to sit here and say gambling does not have effect because, that could be very true. It's hard to say it, and I really don't want to. I don't really want to, really get in there because I don't believe it 100%. But I'm not going to be biased and say there's not a chance of it swinging that way. I mean, to me, do I think this was a gambling move? Not really, because if you bet Detroit, you still won. We lost by 1 point. The spread was 4.5. So if you had money on Detroit, you still won. And you know what I mean? So I think if it was a more gambling move, they would have tried to make it where Dallas would have covered the spread. My honest opinion. I think it's honestly just the fact that, I think it's honestly just the fact that the refs made a bad call and this crew is known for it. I mean, pretty much from the comments that like Aaron Rodgers didn't completely say it about him, but just from the language when he was talking about that ref and that crew, you could tell Rodgers doesn't like him and doesn't think he's a good ref. So that's speaking a lot. I mean, I know it is suspicious because if you actually Google that ref's name and look his record against the Lions with ref and Lions games, the Lions are literally 0-6 when he's been the head ref of the game. So I know that's not helping when I say those facts and those numbers. And to me, that is pretty suspicious. How is one team 0-6 when you've been the head judge? Is it just a coincidence? But then you see a call like that he made on Saturday night. So you really have to sit back and question it because it's just kind of fishy. We're 0-6. You made a bet. You made that bad of a call. I mean, a lot of it's very suspicious. Suspicious. A lot of it's very suspicious.
Oh my
Ron,
goodness, I'm back.
welcome back, buddy.
Well, I'm sorry we got lost. Wow. I got to reload my filters and everything. This thing here is crazy.
Ron said, Chris, I talked to you and David before this season a lot about gambling in the league and the whole Jamison Williams suspension, but I feel this league has gone 100% in the favor of gambling aspect. With the money they are making in this league, I feel the league wouldn't want to see Detroit versus Cleveland in the Super Bowl as much as they would like to see a Dallas versus Baltimore KC Super Bowl. where betting odds would be like you said, half a year ago, the NFL advertised 100% support gambling industry. Look, I'm a Lions fan, but I felt confident in the league that everybody would get a fair shake and put a lot of money on the Lions just to make the Super Bowl. But I made a bet before the draft. And then he said, all I know is this happened to Dallas. I would have been that person who would have came out and said Dallas got robbed if they win. For sure. I mean, I'm not go ahead.
Well, I missed a bunch of what you had to say when I had to reboot, but let me tell you where I was going is that, this officiating crew has made huge errors this year. And so the fact that they won't be participating in the playoffs makes me happy. Okay. As a Chiefs fan, it turns out they were the guys that didn't call pass interference on MBS against the Packers when that would have won the game, for the Chiefs there. Okay. They don't make the right call here. They're error prone. I heard a little bit about you thinking, they should be paying these guys full time. Well, they don't do nothing in the off season.
No,
They have
that's
seminars that they go to. What is it that they're going to be doing other than sitting at home if they're going to pay them, to do something full time? Okay.
um
They're not going to referee another league or it's something else. That's just not feasible for what it is that they're doing. Dean
no
Blandino never brought up Sky Judge, okay, because they don't want Sky Judge. They don't want their judgment to be questioned on the field because it makes them look bad every time they have to turn something around or change it. Okay. The human error part of everything, I understand. Okay. But this isn't baseball. And there is way more money being gambled on the game now than ever before. And you have got to get these calls right. We
yeah.
cannot have these type of things happening when millions of dollars are changing hands. There is a look of impropriety that the league must avoid. Okay. And it's time for Sky Judge. Okay. It's time to make sure that we get things right. I don't know that the Sky Judge would have gotten this correct. Okay. Because he's not on the field. This is not something he can visually see. This is one of those calls where somebody talked to the referee. What they're supposed to do is if they're eligible, they don't even have to walk over to the referee. They go like this. They call it dusting their jersey. Okay. If a lineman dusts his jersey, then that player is now eligible, and they make the announcement. There is plenty of audio of him announcing number 70 reporting is eligible.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not like the guys on the field can't hear him say number 70 reporting is eligible, and 70 is like, wait a minute, I'm not eligible. How come he didn't go over there and say, hey, wait a minute, that's the wrong number? How come 68 didn't go over there and say, hey, that's the wrong number?
But don't get me wrong, he should have.
We couldn't hear. We couldn't hear. He announced that before they ever was in the huddle. Okay. So mistakes were made. Okay. You can blame the refs, and that's fine. Okay. And like I said, Detroit won the game. Okay.
Yeah.
Detroit won the game. They got to take it away by, stupidity and whatever happened. But the players on the field are fully aware of what's going on as well. And they didn't go over and make sure that it got corrected. Okay. That's the problem that I have with it. I don't want to make this whole show about the penalty. We know what happened. There's nothing we can do about it now.
No, what I was saying is Pat McCaffrey on the Pat McCaffrey show brought up
McCaffrey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he brought up that from what he's been hearing is the NFL is working on the officiating. It's still going to take time, and he don't think it's going to happen for a couple of years.
They're always going to be working on the officiating until they have Sky Judge. We've talked about it. Okay. You can have the field crew level, and they continue to do their job in a normal sense of everything that they do. But we've got these guys, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the TV guy. But I mean, these guys have worked for the league. They're in the booth. They're seeing the same thing we're seeing on television. Okay. And so he can be paid both by the TV people and both by the NFL to look at something in real time, that quick. We don't have to go under the hood. We don't have to screw around and slow the game down unless there's something that they really need to take a closer look at. And most of the time, they've shown the replay 3 times to us at home. Stop the game. This is what needs to happen, just like that. Okay. This is what we saw on replay. The call was wrong. This is what it should be. He tells the guy on the field, he's telling us at home, move on with the game. That quickly. Okay. And instead, like I said, I'm not sure that the Sky Judge would have been able to fix this particular problem, but there are so many other calls that are being officiated wrong. Things that are blatantly obvious that we're all seeing at home and we're going, the refs blew the game. The refs robbed them. The refs did this. The refs did that. And it's like that almost every week there is a call like that because the technology has surpassed the naked eye, if you will, from, the referees.
Oh, I'm cool with the Sky Judge.
Yeah,
but
so that's what I'm all in favor for. And so let's move on if you want to here. We got some news today. The biggest news I thought was Dalvin Cook is being released by the New York Jets so that he can join a contender. I find that interesting that they would allow that. I guess it doesn't matter to them because they're not going to be in the playoffs, but there are quite a few teams that could probably use his services, with a chance to get into the playoffs. It'll be interesting to see if somebody claims him on waivers. I'm not sure how much he is making, but probably at a fraction of the cost with only a week left to play in the season.
Yeah.
And, the first team I thought of immediately was Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, they've only got Pacheco. Jerick McKinnon's on injured reserve. Clyde Edwards-Helaire seems to be either hurt or sick all the time. I don't know. Obviously he's not going to know the system fast enough, so he'll be a bit player for any team that he goes to play with. I think that you could see him go to Miami. They've got Mostert has been injured. They've got Achane has been injured from time to time. He wanted to go to Miami, originally, I think, and they weren't interested because they knew they had Achane. They got Jeff Wilson Jr. They've got plenty of running backs. They're 49ers are not going to be looking for him, because they've got McCaffrey, even though he's, a banged up thigh or whatever, and he won't be playing this week. You've got Elijah Mitchell and some other guys there that they like. Who do you think he might end up with? If somebody that could claim him on waivers that's in the playoff position.
I mean, Green Bay could.
Right.
Their running game hasn't been.
Well, Aaron Jones is back and healthy, I think.
Yeah, he had a good game.
Dillon is up to snuff.
We caught
Ron says Cleveland. I'm not sure he could go to Cleveland. I mean, they have, some pretty good running backs there. Ford has picked up the slack where Chubb has left off. Kareem Hunt is there. I'm not sure they'd want to upset the apple cart with the way that the team has been playing this year, in the last several weeks with Flacco at quarterback.
We caught I'm trying to think. I'm kind of curious now. What about the Eagles, maybe?
Well, I mean, the Eagles have a lot of problems. I think there's a real chance that they're going to be one and done. When you're starting to lose to the likes of Arizona, you could barely stay in games, and it was earlier in the year that they showed weaknesses. they let teams put up 30 points on them, like Washington, the Giants. I mean, they are not well defensively in their secondary. They don't have near the sack exchange pass rush that they did last year. And so, because they're not getting to quarterbacks, people are airing it out against them. And, I'm not sure that, the running game is something that needs to be addressed for them. They have Swift, they have Penny, they have Gainwell, they have Scott. They've got plenty of running backs.
That is true.
Yeah.
I just felt like none of the backup running backs
Maybe
were really
Dallas.
helping
Now that
Swift
would be
out.
a spot.
That is
Pollard
true.
has not played, as well as he did last year when he was splitting time with Ezekiel Elliott. Elliott would come in and get the hard yards, and now they're trying, he doesn't get the hard yards. If it's 3rd and 2, he don't get the 2 yards because he's not a hammer, Whereas Cook, I'm not sure he's a hammer either. He would just be another weapon in their offense. But it would take some of the load off of Pollard if he did go to Dallas.
Yeah.
But
Um,
well, let's you got any other
Also,
news of the week?
Bugs is Detroit Lions release Isaiah Bugs today.
Okay. I thought they
Um,
was going to do that earlier in the year.
I thought they were too, but they gave him a chance to try to build back the roster. And a couple games he played, he did make some big plays. He was the big guy that stole the fumble in the Denver game and was trying to run it back. He didn't make it back obviously, but he's made some good plays. But it's sad to see him go. But they brought up Irvin, so Irvin's looked like he's staying on the roster for the playoff run. Um, the tackle from Pittsburgh we signed, veteran, they called him up. You got Houston coming back for the playoffs. You got CJ Gardner-Johnson playing Sunday, and you got McNeil supposedly going to be playing Sunday as well. So I had to there's no way around it. I had to do it. But folks, that's why when you hear voluntary workouts before training camp opens, mandatory training camp, yeah, you don't have to show up. But if you don't show up in shape and ready to go and you're losing to the younger guys, you're going to lose your starting job and eventually find yourself as a free agent. It sucks to see him go because I liked him as a player, but, he did it to himself. And hopefully somebody picks him up.
All right, let's review week 17 in the NFL. We'll start with the Thursday night game, the last Thursday night game of the season. Cleveland Browns lit up the New York Jets. I thought that they really showcased what kind of team that they were. Flacco's making some unbelievable plays. It's like he's back in his prime. I think that his style really fits with this team. And the Jets, I'm not sure that they have as great a defense as people say, or maybe they're just giving up because the season's wearing down on them. But, the Browns, they clinched a playoff spot in front of their home crowd. They were really excited on the broadcast about that to happen. What do you think of Cleveland heading into the playoffs? They have locked in the number 5 spot in the AFC.
I mean, to me, they're going to have a tough route in the playoffs because I believe the AFC is going to be tough in a lot of angles. But if you look, but at the same time, Cleveland could be they could be the dark horse. And why I say that is because with Joe Flacco, it's an easy thing for these other teams to overthink and overlook a team like Cleveland. You know what I mean? How much games Joe Flacco played this season? 5? 4?
He's been there for probably 6 weeks.
So he got about, say, 6 to 5 games underneath his belt. Because I don't know if he played his first game. Or no, he did. He did come in, I believe.
He came in his first game, and they lost a close one to the Rams on the road. And then since then, They played some tough competition. I think they may have lost one other game, but they beat some pretty good teams along the way. And, they've got a really great record. Hell, they got a better record than the Chiefs got. They got
Yeah,
a better record than Buffalo, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Houston. They have the third best record in the AFC right now.
exactly. And that's why when you put the voting up, who you think was going to be the coach of the year in Renegades, that's why I followed your instinct and went Kevin, because that head coach deserves to be the head coach of the year.
4 different starting quarterbacks this year and won with all 4 of them.
Exactly. And to be where they're at with the record is pretty amazing. Don't get me wrong, I wanted Campbell to get it, but I mean, you got to be honest and pass the torch where it really belongs. And Cleveland is a scary team. I wouldn't. I'm actually excited to see what they could do. I know Dan Smith's admin and Renegades. Me and him have been talking the last couple weeks, and he mentioned to me a couple times like, what are the odds and how crazy would it be if Detroit and Cleveland met in the Super Bowl?
That'd be
And
great.
that's what I said.
It would be great, as an independent person from that, matchup, it would be really great because neither one of those teams has been to the Super Bowl. Neither one of those teams has won the Super Bowl. I would love to see a team that's never won win.
And
That includes Buffalo,
for sure.
Jacksonville, Cleveland, Detroit. I'm trying to think of who else is in the playoff mix in the NFC that's never won, but I think everybody has one that is in the NFC playoff right now. And so, I just would love to see, a team that has not won win.
You want to hear
But
some
they got to get over the hump. They got a lot of frustration and years of not winning, that causes them to have a lot of pressure on them,
yeah.
And I think that Detroit has overcome a lot of obstacles and a lot of pressure, but the pressure is about to build up even more. They just had this bad call. We're looking at Detroit and Dallas now. Dallas won 20-19, but we all know Detroit really won. But in the thick of the playoff matchup, this gives Dallas the chance to win the division and clinch the number 2 seed in the NFC playoff, which gives them at least one home game. If they win the first home game, they'll get 2 home games,
Yep.
and they're a different animal at home than they are on the road.
Well,
They're a
hopefully
much
we
better
gave them
team.
a
But
blueprint.
the thing I took away from the Dallas-Detroit game was that Detroit can hang in there with the other really good teams in the NFC. That's what I took away from the game. And so, moving on, because we already talked about those, Buffalo beats New England. They get their 4th straight victory to move to 10-6. They must win, in my opinion. They must beat Miami this week, or they're probably going to be out of the playoffs. Okay. They can go from either being the 2nd seed to not being in the playoffs at all. Okay. Based on the game against Miami. Okay. They struggled against New England's defense. New England's defense is really starting to come along. Bill Belichick has been playing well, considering, this probably going to be his last season there. They're being real mum on the subject, but I think we all know what's going to happen.
Yep.
Chicago played spectacular in the snow, and they are chanting for Justin Fields at the end of the game. That the Bears fans want to keep him. I think I talked to a couple of Bears fans over the last 2 days. They think the smartest move would be to stick with him. They're starting to come around. Okay. If he stays in the same offense, he won't have to learn a new offense. If they keep the coaching staff around, I think that Eberflus may have saved his job over the last several weeks. And if they keep the coaching staff if they keep Fields, they can trade that number 1 pick for a boatload of picks. They'll probably pick up Marvin Harrison Jr., get some offensive line, continue to make that defense even stouter than it's been recently. Chicago could be a big player this offseason.
I agree with you. I think if their head coach stays put, Fields is the quarterback. That's what I truly think. But there's been a lot of rumors that former coach has been in talks over there, and they want Harbaugh, according to because Harbaugh is real close.
I talked to some people. The guy who is the president of the team is the former commissioner of the Big Ten. They don't get along real well. And so, if Harbaugh is coming to the NFL, it's probably going to be with the Chargers, because I don't think that the Vegas Raider job's going to open up. I think Antonio Pierce has locked that up. He may make a few changes to his staff, but the team believes in him as the head coach, and they played much better with him in that spot.
I get that.
Just depends on what other jobs become available. I think Michigan's going to win the national championship, and Harbaugh is going to ride off into the sunset to his next gig in the NFL.
I think, well, if you want my opinion, I'm almost officially going to tell you, win or lose Monday night, he's gone. Because he just hired a new agent, same agent that represents Sean Payton, has deep ties to the NFL, has worked with the Mannings, etc. So to me, why are you hiring a whole new agent when you just got a 10-year extension and over $100 million offered to you by Michigan? You ain't hiring an agent like that to stay at Michigan. That's a fact. So that's what I mean. And I've heard a lot of rumors about Chicago. And if that's true, I could see him go to Chicago because he'd be able to draft some of those kids coming out of Ann Arbor to the Bears with their draft picks.
Well, the LA Rams held on for dear life at the end of the game against the New York Giants. They managed to win the game. I think the Rams are really a dangerous team. I think that going all the way to the East Coast and still managing to come away with the victory against a Giant team that has played a lot better over the last few weeks. I just think that it'll be interesting to see what kind of matchups they get in the NFC playoffs. I think that a lot of people want to see the Rams play the Lions because they either want to beat Stafford or they want, Goff, to kind of get revenge against the Rams for trading him away and making him feel like he was trash when he was a good player for him. And what do you think about that?
Honestly, I'm all for it. I would love nothing more than to have the Rams come to Detroit and leave on the plane going home to the couch. Also, I'm not buying in just to the Stafford and Goff. Would I love to see Goff get his revenge? Yes. But I love the city of Detroit kind of get one over on Stafford for winning the Super Bowl. Yeah, it'd be to me, it would be a good thing for the team moving forward to the next game in the playoffs. It would give us something to feed off, in my opinion. But honestly, I don't care who we play in the playoffs at this point. I just want them to take care of the Vikings this week, go in the playoff game, take care of business. I'm hoping that they're using this Dallas game with a chip on their shoulder feeding off of it. And from the sounds of Dan Campbell, the team is. I've heard multiple people say they want a rematch in Dallas in the playoffs. So to me, I don't care.
They could get it. If they're the 3 seed, they could face Dallas in the divisional playoff round if Dallas knocks off whoever the 7th seed's going to be.
Exactly.
So, Colts, it wasn't as close as the score indicated. The Colts dominated the Raiders. Jonathan Taylor looks like he's fully healthy again. Colts are in a position to make the playoffs. They need a victory and a little bit of help. The Arizona Cardinals stun the Philadelphia Eagles. And, this is what we were just talking about. The Eagles, they're a train wreck, man. Look, they give up 35 points to Arizona. They did it at home. Now, I know Kyler Murray is a dynamic player. I know that, they've got some playmakers on that team. And Arizona was a playoff team just a couple years ago, and they just needed Murray to be healthy and, a coaching staff that they could believe in. And I think they have that. Arizona's going to have some pretty good picks, because they traded with, Houston so that Houston had the second and third pick. So they got quite a few extra picks in this next draft. I would be on the lookout for Arizona in 2024.
Yeah, it looks like
But,
Kyler Murray might not be going anywhere, too.
yeah, I mean, there was rumors he would get traded away because they were going to draft somebody. But their draft position has fallen and fallen to where they're probably not going to be in a position to, draft a quarterback. And so maybe they'll trade their picks away too to another team that needs,
Yeah.
quarterback help.
And to
But as
me,
far as Philadelphia goes, they're in desperation mode. They need to beat the New York Giants on the last week of the season. If they go into the playoffs on a 2-game losing streak, my goodness, I tell you, they're definitely not the team that they were last year. They lost their coordinators. Shane Steichen went to the Colts, and the Colts are doing well. Gammon, the defensive coordinator, he's in Arizona,
yeah.
So he knew the Eagles team well and probably planned for them accordingly. But, they lost quite a few, defensive players. They tried to replace them with some young players in the draft. I think that they improved their running game. I love Swift being there.
Yeah, to me, I'll give Swift credit. Swift's been a whole different back than we've ever seen in Detroit. I wish we seen the Swift that's been playing in Philadelphia earlier in the year. Because guess what, Swift, you would still have your job. It would be you and Montgomery, and Gibbs would have went somewhere else if we would have seen that type running. But what I want to say about the Eagles is I know I sounded probably a little bit crazy a few weeks ago when I brought up that article about Brown comments about Hurts. And I know it was real early. That's why I said that's why when I posted it in the group, I said I think this is BS. But I'm really starting to think all of it's true now. They're in the locker room. They're fighting like a bunch of little kids, and they're blaming each other. And I hate to say it, if we don't see a fucking dominant performance, they're screwed in my eyes. If they can't go there and dominate the Giants.
If Philadelphia is one and done, A.J. Brown will be playing for a different team next year.
Oh, for sure. 100%. I felt bad for Jason Kelce because if the Lions couldn't win the Super Bowl, I was going to pull for him because I've always liked him. I like his personality. I like him as a player, leader, etc. And I know how hard it is, when you're debating right there on the fence about walking away and you still want to come back and get that championship, And right now I feel bad for him because I don't know if it's going to work out in his favor.
Yeah, Ron says that it was the best game that Arizona played this year. And remember, they beat Dallas earlier in the year. But Philadelphia is not nearly as good as the media has made them out to be. And I'd have to agree. But the sense of how good they were was kind of a carryover from the fact that they nearly beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl this last year. They were in the Super Bowl. They were dominant early in the season, against some really good teams. They lit up Miami, they lit up Buffalo. Now, Buffalo played them tight, but they managed to get the victory. But, I just think that as the season is worn on, and people have said this in the media, they're tired. They're just tired. They're worn out. Some of their veteran players are older guys like Kelce, Fletcher Cox, and they're just so many games that they played last year. The season's longer, as with 17 games. And, they've done a lot of traveling when it comes to going across. They went all the way to Seattle. I think they went all the way to Los Angeles a couple of times.
And then they went to Germany, right? Didn't they go overseas for a game?
No, they didn't go to Germany.
I thought they went overseas.
No, that was the Chiefs went to Germany.
Okay, that's it.
But they're just tired. They're worn out, and we'll just have to see where things go from here. But I'm not expecting a whole lot from Philadelphia from this point on.
I think shit's falling. I think shit's so bad that the coaches are fighting amongst each other for their defense coordinator going to Matt Patricia in the middle of the season and towards the end of the season, like it did. To be honest.
New Orleans Saints keep their playoff hopes alive with a 23-13 victory over Tampa. Now, Tampa and New Orleans have the same record at 8-8, but Tampa's got the better conference record. And so because of that, or divisional record, one of the two, because of that, New Orleans needs a victory over Atlanta this next week, and they need Tampa to lose. The problem is Tampa's playing the Carolina Panthers. And so probably a pretty good chance that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to win the NFC South and go into the playoffs. And they'll probably end up playing, if things hold to form, the Eagles in the first round.
And I just want to take a second and read this real quick to you. Do you think, first, and then the question, do you think that the Buccaneers should re-sign Baker Mayfield?
Absolutely. I mean, unless somebody else comes along that that they can get for the equal amount of money. I don't know who is going to be available out there who would want to come to Tampa. I think he's earned the job. He's already there. He already knows the system. I mean, they're going to sign him to at least a 2 or 3 year contract. I wouldn't give him a $40 million a year deal, but he's worth $30 million.
Put it this way, let me read this to you real quick. Baker Mayfield is making less than $4 million a season. He has more passing yards, 3,907 than C.J. Stroud, Jalen Hurts, and Trevor Lawrence. With 28 passing touchdowns, he has more than Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Russell Wilson. He has a better passer rating than Patrick Mahomes at a 95.9 and a Matthew Stafford and a Justin Herbert.
Well,
that's pretty crazy when you break out the numbers.
There was no market for him. Okay. All of the top teams with the draft picks knew they were going to be getting a quarterback in the draft. Okay. And so he had to go to a team that was basically ready-made. Remember, Tom Brady played for the Buccaneers last year. So They've got weapons. They've got a defense. They're not the same team, of course. They changed offensive coordinators. They let Byron Leftwich go. And, but you got the same head coach in Todd Bowles. And so, I mean, really, it was a perfect fit. But there wasn't anybody beating his door down to come and be on their team. I'm sure he got some offers to come in and be a backup, but they were given an opportunity to compete for the starting job with Kyle Trask in the preseason. And so this was the place that he went. So they didn't have to offer him a boatload of money to come there. Yeah. Now he's going to get paid now because he showed that he can do what he can do.
Exactly.
When you have an organization that isn't out of control like Cleveland has been in the past, and when he went to Carolina, look what's happened to Carolina. Okay. That wasn't a good situation for him. He goes to the Rams, and on 2 days of knowledge, wins a game, for the Rams when Stafford was out last
It
year.
completely fucked Detroit
Okay.
in the draft picks
And
in the
played
playoffs.
well with a hurt team down the stretch. I really thought, because there was talk that Stafford may be done with his
Yeah,
elbow injury. And if that would have been the case, I think Baker Mayfield would have been the starting quarterback in LA, you know.
probably would
And
have.
so when that didn't happen, it opened it up for him to have a chance to go elsewhere. And Tampa snatched him right up. And like we said, I think he'll get at least a 2 or 3 year contract, because of how many years he's been in the league already. They don't want to tie up, too much money on him because they got a lot of aging veterans they're going to have to replace over the next several years, especially on the defense and at the wide receiver position. And so, I see him staying in Tampa.
I just want to give him credit because I wanted to see him win a starting job, and he didn't.
San Francisco takes care of business on the road against Washington after that sad loss against Baltimore the week before. San Francisco wins this game. They lock up the number 1 seed in the NFC so they can rest their players next week. Washington didn't put up much of a fight against San Francisco. San Francisco obviously was the better team. Jacksonville shuts out Carolina 26-0 with CJ Beathard as the starting quarterback. Trevor Lawrence is out with, a multitude of injuries. So this here was just, throwing Carolina to the wolves, if you will, with, Jacksonville playing a steady game overall. Apparently made the owner mad enough that he threw drinks at the crowd that was heckling him. And the league will be talking to him real soon, fine-wise and more.
That's another thing they brought up on Pat brought up about him throwing the drink and how ignorant he truly is as an owner. And that's what they were like really saying, like that they talked to Adam Scheffler about Harbaugh leave for NFL, and they brought up Carolina. And he's like, you think Jim would think about going to Carolina? And I was like, probably not, because I could see him and the owner at neck and neck right off the bat. Ron said he got a $300,000 fine today.
Well, he deserved it. Don't act like a damn kid. Jacksonville holds on to the top spot in the AFC South right now, tied record with the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts. Any of those 3 teams could win the AFC South Division if they win their game this week and one of these other teams or 2 of these teams lose. Then the other team would take over the AFC South. Jacksonville's still looking to get into the playoffs. They have not clinched a playoff berth. Neither has Indianapolis or Houston. Baltimore beats up big time on Miami. They did not have Raheem Mostert. Miami did not. And, of course, they're playing on the road. They've got some injuries. They lost Bradley Chubb in this game with a torn ACL. Miami's not looking good at this particular time, but there has been several teams this year that have been bludgeoned by the Ravens. They lock up the number 1 seed in the AFC, Chris.
Yes. Miami, I'm going to say this. I was high on Miami in the offseason, but after I don't think they're going to be as good as I thought they were in the playoffs. Just because of, I think, coaching mistakes. I mean, granted, they lost this game. You know what I mean? This game really don't make it where they can't go all the way. But just the stupidity to me. They brought this up. I know I read a couple articles on it when Chubb got hurt. And they did bring this up on Pat's show today as well. Why was Chubb still in the game when they were down by 30 and had no chance of coming back pretty much at that time?
I would say the reason he was in is because he's a player and wants to play. The a defensive end position or outside linebacker, whatever they label him as, is probably not as delicate a position that they want to protect as like a quarterback would be or running back. And so, they just left him in there. He may be trying to get sack bonuses or something along those lines.
Yeah,
And,
I'm
when a player wants to play, rarely do they get told, no, you can't go back out there. It was probably his own fault.
uh that's what they brought up too, and they were talking, but still the point, it's like it just sucks for him. And then to me, that's a player that could really hurt him when it comes playoff time. Because Chubb, the dude's a beast. The dude's played in playoffs. He's won a Super Bowl. He's one of those players you would want on your team in the biggest games of the year. And now he's not going to be there.
Houston Texans get C.J. Stroud back from concussion protocol, and they managed to beat down on the Tennessee Titans 26-3. I know that because we're in NFL Renegades, a lot of people are voting for Sam Laporta, but because of the specialness or whatever you will of the quarterback position, I think C.J. Stroud is going to be named the NFL's Offensive Rookie of the Year. A lot of people think, and he didn't get many votes last I saw, but Puka Nakua has got more receiving yards as a rookie than any player has in the history of the NFL, okay, in his rookie year.
Yeah.
And they still got another week to go. They need the victory to secure that they're going to be in the playoffs. And so, I thought it's definitely between the three of them. But the way C.J. Stroud has played all year long, only injury really has slowed him down over the last few weeks. I think C.J. Stroud's going to be the rookie of the year, Chris.
Okay. Yeah, I did. I voted. And honestly, I voted for CJ Stroud first. What made me switch my pick to Laporta actually was because for some reason I thought CJ Stroud didn't play last week due to that last injury for some reason. So that was my mistake because I felt like if he didn't play last week, the injury might have actually hurt him towards the end, especially with Laporta breaking the rookie tight end touchdowns and his stuff. I thought, and that's only why I think he's over the Rams receiver, should be at least over him, is because he got some more touchdowns and everything and he's the first tight end as a rookie to put these numbers up as well. But no, I totally agree with you. I expect CJ Stroud to get it over Sam. I wouldn't be mad if they gave it to Sam because I think he's earned a real case to win it. But like you said, quarterbacks are favored in a lot of these awards. I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm not going to sit here and say CJ Stroud hasn't earned that either, because out of all the rookie quarterbacks, the kids definitely made me eat my words from
Houston's
preseason.
looking to get in the playoffs. If they win, they're still going to need some help at this point. But the next game is the Steelers, and I called this one. I picked this one here. Pittsburgh with Mason Rudolph as the starter is a different offense, and they played really well and went on the road all the way to Seattle. I think Pittsburgh has put the nail in the coffin for the Seahawks for this year. I think Seattle would have to win the last game of the year and get lots of help, which I just don't think is going to happen. I think Green Bay is in the prime spot to get that 7th spot. But Pittsburgh, they ran the ball better against Seattle than I think they have in a while. Najee Harris had over 100 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns in the game. And it was because of the threat of the offensive pass with Mason Rudolph. He had a couple of big passes to George Pickens. And I think that Rudolph has played himself at the very least back into the backup role. because I think Trubisky's contract is up in Pittsburgh at the end of this year. And I think they're still going to give Pickett another year to see what he can do. But, he has not lived up to the expectations at this point because they changed offensive coordinators. Maybe he hasn't really gotten a fair shake at this point because of injuries and not just to himself, but other players and the offensive line. But I think Mason Rudolph has played his way back into the good graces there in Pittsburgh. And, they played really well against the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks tried to run the ball a lot. They did well with Kenneth Walker III, but the passing game has really disappeared for Seattle over the last several weeks. Their defense has not been what it was earlier in the year due to injuries and such. And I just thought this was a great game for Pittsburgh to go on the road and win this game.
Yep, it was, and that's what sucks is having a young, good defense, but having younger players having to replace the people that get hurt. I'm curious to see what happens in Seattle this offseason, though.
Well, so we moved to Denver, who benched Russell Wilson because they don't want to pay him an injury guarantee in the event he were to get injured. They would owe him $37 million here in March. And the way that him and his camp have reacted to this, I think has pretty much paved the way that he will not be in Denver for sure now after this season. They had Stidham. Jarrett Stidham was the quarterback for Denver. They beat the Chargers 16-9. Chargers obviously eliminated from the playoff race. Denver was eliminated, and so was the Raiders, thanks to the Chiefs' victory over the Bengals. But real quick on the Russell Wilson front, I was listening to Pro Football Talk, and there was Peter King and Mike Florio, and they discussed the possibilities of where, Russell Wilson was going to be going, this next year, because of the way him and his camp have acted. And it's been kind of this way since his last year in Seattle that, there are some things that are in his favor this next year when it comes to going somewhere. And those things are that the Denver Broncos have to pay whatever money he doesn't sign his contract with the next team. So it's $37 million or $34 million or whatever it may be. If he only signs for a few $1 million, Denver's got to pay the rest of it, and it counts against their cap. And so learning that, Peter King said that he thinks that Russell Wilson will sign for the veterans minimum at quarterback, which is $1.2 million on a one-year deal with somebody just to stick it to Denver, and he'll go to a team where he could compete for the starting job. And a few teams have been thrown out there, and the team that I thought was interesting, and I could see why they might do it, was the Minnesota Vikings. And the reason why I thought this was interesting is because Minnesota's got cap purgatory. Kirk Cousins isn't under contract, and Kevin O'Connell saw the value in a shorter period of time that Joshua Dobbs was the starting quarterback of having a mobile passer. And Russell Wilson is a mobile passer. He's not as mobile as he used to be, but he's still got wheels. He showed this year in Denver that he can get around. He lost some weight. And if he can pick up the offense, which remember, the offense in Minnesota comes from the Rams, and the former offensive coordinator with the Rams was the offensive coordinator his last year in Seattle. So, when you take all these things into consideration, he probably knows the system. He can be on the cheap, which will open up a lot of cap room for the Vikings to get their cap situation straightened out this next year. They'll have a mobile quarterback who they think can help them win. They won't have to re-sign Kirk Cousins to a $40+ million contract. And, Denver and Minnesota have a lot of ties over the last several years. The former, uh, one of their former guys there is the general manager in Denver, and so I think a lot of things point for him going to Minnesota. I would not be opposed to that because of the favorable situation that would put the team in. What do you think of that, Chris?
It'd be a smart move on Minnesota, but I would have to see what I would have to see what direction it goes with Cousins here in a couple of weeks before I would actually believe that's going to take place. Because I feel like, according from a lot of reports, is the whole team loves Cousins and they want him back. So to me, but it'd be smart. It would be smart, and I think Russell Wilson, especially if you keep Justin Jefferson with Allison, that's
Yeah,
like
I mean, if they sign Russell Wilson to a 1 year deal for $1.2 million,
that
okay,
helps him a
they're
lot.
going to have the money for Jefferson. They're going to have the money to go out and get them a real, all pro runner, and there may be a few available. It'd be so funny if Dalvin Cook ended up back with Minnesota,
It
after
would be
basically
fun.
taking a year off with the New York Jets. There's a lot of players out there that are, Jamal Williams only signed a 1 year deal with the Saints. You've got, Derrick Henry may be up for trade. You've got, there's some other players that Minnesota maybe wanted to look at, and they would have cap flexibility if they signed Russell Wilson. And so I understand, the bringing back of Kirk Cousins. I'm not opposed to that at all because I think he's a really good quarterback, despite what everybody says. That he's a liability. Basically when the chips are down, he becomes a liability. I don't feel like that's the case. You
Yeah,
know, and I think that we got a behind the scenes look in that quarterback series this last year of how tough a guy he is, the things he goes through to perform out on the field for his team and his family. And, I think a lot of people's minds got changed about the kind of player that Kirk Cousins is.
I totally agree. Um, what about Pittsburgh? You want to see maybe Russell Wilson going to Pittsburgh?
I think they've kind of got a plan there already with Pickett and then Rudolph playing so well here at the end of the season. Um, you never know what GMs are thinking. I mean, if Trubisky is done after his 2 year contract, I think that he signed there. I don't think Pittsburgh is a place that you would see Russell Wilson because he's going to be looking for a chance to start. And so, it's probably either Washington Commanders, Minnesota Vikings, um, maybe the Raiders. Places like that are going to be on his radar, and it'll depend on if they have mutual interest or not.
Sure.
So we move on to Kansas City beating the Cincinnati Bengals. The
Ron
Chiefs
got
kind
some
of got
comment for
back to
you.
their roots offensively, where they, didn't try to force the ball down the field. They took the field goals when they were available, um, you know, and they held Cincinnati, another team that, scores quite a few points. Kansas City's defense held them under 20 points again, 17 points out of Cincinnati. Browning played well for the most part, but L'Jarius Sneed's going to get paid either from Kansas City or from somebody else as being one of the top corners in free agency at the end of this season.
Oh, for
I
sure.
hope he doesn't run off and leave and go to another team, but he's a $20 million a year corner, and they're not. I don't know that they're going to have the money for it. It just depends on what kind of deal they can strike with Chris Jones, how much the salary cap's going to go up, this year for the Chiefs, and they may have to pick between one of the two, and which one is going to get the money. An aging defensive lineman or a young shutdown corner. I mean, it's going to be up to them. But Kansas City locks up their 8th straight AFC West championship, and they have now won more AFC West titles than any other team in that division. They were all tied with 15. The Chiefs now have 16 because the AFC West has always been the AFC West. Only the Seahawks are not there anymore when they went to the NFC during realignment several years ago. And Kansas City is probably locked into the 3 seed now in the AFC. So they're going to play whoever the 6 seed is when it comes time for the playoffs to start in Kansas City. There's a chance they may rest their starters, but we'll get to that, when we do the preview for week number 18. Green Bay eliminated basically Minnesota. They have no shot to get into the playoffs now. And Green Bay kind of controls their own destiny. With the victory in Minnesota, 33-10, all they have to do is win in week number 18. And if they do, they're going to be probably the 7th seed in the NFC.
Yep, and if the Rams lose, they could be the 6th seed.
All right, so there's our breakdown.
Ron got a comment for you. He said, Pacheco is badass. I watched most of this game as well. The rest of the KC, except their defensive line, I don't know what's going on there.
Right. And Ron thinks Wilson will go to Vegas. I think it's a good spot for him. He'll get to play Denver twice a year, get kind of revenge, and Denver's going to have to pay him to play for the Raiders. So I mean, and it'll keep him close on the West Coast. Because he's got his wife as a singer and actress and everything, and so we'll just have to see how that goes.
Don't get me wrong. I'd rather him go to Vegas than him go to the Vikings, to be 100% honest, because that could be a really good team. But
right,
looking at it as a player, if he's smart enough, he would go to Minnesota over Vegas, because as much as I like Antonio Pierce as the head coach there, you're still dealing with Mark fucking Davis. And nothing, I don't know, ever since he's had control of this team, ever since I've known football, I've only seen, like, when I was really young, when the Raiders made the Super Bowl against the Buccaneers, and when John Lynch played for Tampa, and, that was the only year I remember the Oakland Raiders being a really, really good team. And then a couple years later, they were still a good team because they made it in the playoffs against Brady.
I mean, they've had a storied history, but it's history. It's been a long time since they've done something. I think that ownership has gotten in the way of them, the stability of the franchise. I thought when Derek Carr, the year that they made the playoffs, and Derek Carr broke his leg and they ended up losing to Houston, Jack Del Rio was a great head coach for the team, but John Gruden was available and they made the switch and they went downhill for a few years, instead of continuing to rise, because they already had a system in place offensively. They already had a system in place defensively. When you make a coaching change, it throws the whole system into upheaval, because they're not coming in. It's not like he promoted the offensive coordinator to head coach because the head coach was out. They changed everybody. And so, and then once again, Derek Carr was the quarterback. They had Rich Bisaccia. He's an interim head coach. They make the playoffs. They nearly beat the Bengals, in Cincinnati. And instead of giving the job to Rich Bisaccia, I've got to have Josh McDaniels. And so another mistake by ownership. So I understand where you're coming from with the Mark Davis angle. I think that maybe he has learned his lesson in meddling with the head coaching situation. They may want to bring in a new general manager. I don't know the interim general manager at all, but the head coach may make some changes on his staff. But I like Antonio Pierce. One, he's played in the league. He's got a linebacker mentality. He has a respect to the players. They don't have to, interview anybody else because he's, African American, and so he fits the bill completely for that team. Okay,
I think
and
so.
so I think it would be smart if they stuck with him. They beat Kansas City in Kansas City. You know, they beat to beat the Chargers down. I know that they didn't have Justin Herbert and everything, but I mean, they've looked really good, at times, and I know they have looked bad too. But that's what happens when you have a young team that's trying to learn to be a winner. Now, they got a
Yes.
few veterans on the team. If they manage to convince Devontae Adams to stay and he doesn't want to get traded off to the Jets or whatever they're offensively, they're going to bring back Aiden O'Connell. They may get, Russ Wilson to come in there and be, the quarterback, or they may go in another direction. But it's not going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. I expect him to be a post June 1st cut or whatever they call it. They'll let him out of his contract earlier than that. But for cap reasons, they'll have to say it's post June 1st. But and he'll end up somewhere as a backup, maybe back in New England. But depending on if Bill Belichick's going to still be there or not.
Yeah. And to
But
while you pull that up, I'm going to read Ron's comment. Ron put Antonio Pierce as the coach for that team, but I've heard rumors of Gruden again. And that is not a miss, in my opinion. He's always legit. I think I've heard rumors too. I just hope it don't happen.
I think you're just going backwards. I think you're going
Yeah.
backwards. The reason that John Gruden won the Super Bowl is he had Tony Dungy's defense in Tampa. Okay. He come in and he brought offense, but he doesn't bring anything to the defensive side. Okay. That's why John Gruden won the Super Bowl when he was with the Buccaneers. Yes, they were building something, and that team ended up in the Super Bowl against them with the coach that was on his staff, using his offense and everything. But the second time around, it was not nearly as sweet to be with the Raiders. As John Gruden is a sub 500 coach, with the exception of about 3 seasons as a head coach.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I think that you should give a younger guy, a guy that's already been there, who has the respect of the team, an opportunity, to continue to see what he has. If after the end of this year, you played 2024 and things don't work out and you don't see growth, then you could probably go ahead and make a change. But, to give this guy the interim tag, have him do what he has done this rest of this season, and then kick him to the curb, I think is a mistake.
Totally agree.
All right, we're going to preview now week number 18, and we'll take a look at the playoff preview as well. We've got the 9-7 Pittsburgh Steelers on Saturday playing at the Baltimore Ravens at 11-5. Pittsburgh needs the victory to secure a playoff berth. And, of course, also some help. But I think that Baltimore is going to rest their starters. I think if they, I heard on Pro Football Talk today that the line already says that Pittsburgh is favored to win the game. If they're favored to win the game, they already know the rest of their starters for Baltimore. And so I think that the starters rest for Baltimore. Mason Rudolph gets the start again for Pittsburgh. I'm going to take Pittsburgh Steelers to go ahead and win in Baltimore because the starters are resting.
I'm going to stick with the same pick as long as the starters does not play.
This game right here is a playoff game, okay? You got the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts. The winner is probably in. The loser is probably out. And so both teams are 9-7. Houston's got C.J. Stroud back. Of course, they're playing in Indianapolis, so they got Gardner Minshew. The running game has come back alive here with not Zach Taylor, Jonathan Taylor. And They should probably have Michael Pittman Jr. back at wide receiver, from concussion protocol. And so I think this will be a really good game. I don't recall who won between the two of them earlier in the season, but I think that
I think the
when
Colts
it
did.
comes to, you got both of them are rookie head coaches. You've got a rookie quarterback in Houston. You've got a veteran, basically backup starting for Indianapolis. Both teams' running games have been all right. Both teams' defenses have been all right. Because they're playing on the road, only because they're playing on the road, am I going to go ahead and take the Indianapolis Colts to win the game?
I'm gonna roll with CJ Shaw and the Texans.
Okay. Sunday, and this is a big game for the New Orleans Saints. They need the Carolina Panthers at 2-14 to somehow upset the 8-8 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If the Buccaneers win, they are all not only in the playoffs, but they clinch the NFC South and the fourth seed in the NFC. I don't see the Panthers winning this game. They got shut out by a backup quarterback last week on the road in Jacksonville. I think Tampa Bay, if they play things right, they don't overlook the team, they should win, and Tampa gets in the playoffs and wins the NFC South for the second consecutive year.
I'm going with Tampa.
The Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals. Cleveland 11-5, Bengals 8-8. Bengals were eliminated by Kansas City, so they don't really have anything to play for other than to be spoiler. Cleveland cannot be any better than the 5 seed, but I think that they will play their players at least the first half of the game. And I think that, it'll just depend on whether Cincinnati gives it their all. But because I think Cincinnati is going to, play all their starters the entire game, and Cleveland's not going to play all their starters the whole game, I'll take Cincinnati on the road, or Cincinnati at home.
I'm going to stick with the Browns.
Minnesota Vikings basically eliminated last week by Green Bay. They go to the Lions at 11-5. Still a slight chance that the Lions could pick up the 2 seed, but they would need both Dallas and Philadelphia to lose, and the Lions would win. That's the only way they get the 2 seed. At this, and I think that they already beat Minnesota in Minnesota. I think that the Lions should win this game. I think they want to keep rolling. I think that they want to make some adjustments. They want to get some things right. There was some mistakes, some turnovers, some penalties, some things that they did not do well against Dallas that made that game a lot closer than it should have been. I think Detroit wins against Minnesota.
Same here. Got to go in the playoffs strong.
The Jets at 6-10 against the Patriots at 4-12, and this is basically for draft position and for pride. It could be Bill Belichick's final game as the head coach of the New England Patriots. The Jets have not played well against the Patriots historically. I like the Patriots and their defense to beat the Jets.
I'm going to take the Patriots, even though I think they should be smart and purposely lose this game just for draft capital. But since it's probably Bill Belichick's last game, I expect them to go out there and play their butts off for him. And I see him winning this game.
The Falcons could still technically win the NFC South, but they would have to beat the Saints, and they'd have to have Tampa lose to Carolina. The Saints need a victory over the Falcons, and they need Tampa Bay to lose to Carolina. And so technically all 3 of these teams are still in the playoff hunt because of the division title. I think that the Saints lost a huge opportunity earlier in the year when they lost to Atlanta. I think that they get their revenge here. It isn't going to be enough to get into the playoffs, but the Saints should beat the Falcons in week 17.
But what if or never mind. Never mind. I got divisions mixed up. Never mind.
Who you like? Falcons, Saints.
Saints.
Jacksonville Jaguars playing at the Tennessee Titans. And, Tennessee comes off a thumping by the Houston Texans. They're playing at home. This could be Mike Vrabel's final game as head coach of the Tennessee Titans. Jacksonville, we don't know whether they'll have Trevor Lawrence back yet or not, but Jacksonville needs to win this game to secure the 4th seed and get a home game in the playoffs. They'll win the AFC South if they get the victory. If they lose, they could still win the AFC South, I think, but only if the Colts beat Houston. Otherwise, if Houston beats Indianapolis, Houston would be the winner in the AFC South. It gets real complicated at this point, but Jacksonville just needs to beat Tennessee, and I like Jacksonville to do so.
I do too. Well, this is a trap game, especially if Lawrence don't play.
More games on Sunday. We got the 8-8 Seahawks, 4-12 Arizona Cardinals. Just the way the Cardinals have been playing lately, I think Seattle knows they're out of the playoffs. They may do everything they can to win the game, but I like Arizona to win this game.
I like Arizona too, especially if they can control the pass and I like the Cardinals.
This is a tough game here. Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears have been playing well as of late. They nearly beat the Cleveland Browns. They lit up the team they played last week. The Packers, they lit up the Vikings. The Packers need to win, and they are in. They will be at least the 7th seed with a victory. Could be the 6th seed, as we talked about earlier. But, they are 8-8 right now. They can move to 9-8 and get in the playoffs with a victory. This is a tough game here. I think that Chicago is going to give them everything that they can handle. I want to see that Green Bay is going to win, but I'm scared Chicago may get this one.
Chicago. I'm going to go with Chicago. Something tells me. Their defense has got pretty good. Now, can Chicago make the playoffs at all? Is there a chance for the wild card?
No, they're out.
Okay. So if the Packers lose, would they still be in the wild card? Or who would they lose?
It would depend on other teams losing.
Who would get it automatically if they lose? Do you know?
Well, let's see. If Seattle won and the Packers lost, I think Seattle would still be in the playoffs ahead of them.
Okay. What if they both lose?
If they both lose, Green Bay would be in the playoff. Because Green Bay has the better conference record and division record when it comes to Chicago. And I think Green Bay's got the better conference record than Seattle.
Okay, see, I didn't know if there was a team right behind both Seattle and Green Bay that could take their spot if they won and they both lost.
Well, I think if Seattle lost and Green Bay lost, that would mean that would open the door for New Orleans if New Orleans won. They could make the playoffs. They would need Seattle to lose. They would need Green Bay to lose. They would need Minnesota to lose. We'll look at the standings here in a little bit. There's a lot of things that could happen that could get Green Bay out if they lost and other teams were to win.
Sure.
Because Green Bay's 8-8. Well, so is, Tampa Bay. So is New Orleans. Tampa Bay with the win gets in. New Orleans could still get in if Seattle lost, Green Bay lost, and I think there's one other team that would have to lose. We'll look in a minute. Kansas City Chiefs 10-6 against the 5-11 Chargers. Chargers have not been any good since Herbert went down. The defense has been, really bad, for the last several weeks. Um, I'm not sure Kansas City is going to play their starters for very long. They, you've got Pacheco needs 65 yards to get 1,000. Kelsey needs like 20 yards for 1,000 yards. Rice needs, less than 100 yards to have 1,000 yards receiving. Um, Andy Reid is not known to rest his starters, but this is going to be the first year that they don't have a bye going into the playoffs. So he may change his mind, and rest the starters. He may also have them only play the first half because he doesn't want anybody to get hurt. They're probably going to end up playing the loser of the Buffalo Miami game. And so, real good chance that they face Buffalo in the first round of the playoffs. He's going to want them to be at full strength.
Right, so I'm still going to take KC.
I'm taking Kansas City as well. We've got the Broncos and the Raiders. The Broncos and Raiders both were already eliminated from the playoffs, so nobody cares about this game. Oh, that's me just being an AFC West homer with the Chiefs. Denver's playing better. I think they'll go on the road and they'll beat Vegas.
I'm going to take Vegas just because I want to see Pierce. I want to have Pierce 8-9 that way, and hopefully he gets his first head coaching job with that record.
Eagles 11-5 at 5-11 Giants. The Eagles have to win this game. The Eagles have to win this game. If they do not win this game, they are not going to be in very good position to go in. The Eagles can still end up with the NFC East title, but they need a victory and a loss by Dallas against Washington in order to lock up the NFC East. And so, I think they would still be the number 2 seed if that happens. If Philadelphia and Dallas both lose, Detroit wins, they move to the number 2 seed. And it's all about playoff positioning and how many home games you get. If you win in the playoffs as a number 2 seed, you're going to have 2 home playoff games. If you end up as the 3 seed, you're only guaranteed, 1 playoff game at home. And so, I like the Eagles. I think that they have to win this game against the Giants. I think it'll be a tough game. It won't be a gimme, but the Eagles win.
Since I think the Eagles win, but since I'm rooting for the Giants, I'm going to go with the Giants.
Okay.
We all know how tough this NFC is.
They already said they're going to rest Christian McCaffrey, probably going to rest some of their other starters. The Rams, they could use the victory to cement their spot in the playoffs. Technically they are in the 6th spot right now, but a loss and wins by other teams, and they could be out. So, they need to go ahead and win this game if possible. I like the Rams to win the game because historically the Rams do very well against the 49ers, even when they're at full strength. And the 49ers are probably resting a majority of their starters. So I'll take the Rams.
I'll take the Rams too.
Cowboys against the Commanders. Cowboys need this win to wrap up the number 2 seed in the NFC and the NFC East crown. I think the way that Washington has been playing lately, Dallas shouldn't have any trouble, but they do have trouble when they go on the road. I'll take Dallas, but it's not going to be as easy as you'd think it will be.
I'm taking the Commanders. Same thing.
Ron says Commanders have no chance.
Oh,
you're taking the Commanders because you're only taking the Commanders because you hate Dallas and what happened this last week.
Hey,
you're not making a smart selection. You're just being emotional.
Hey, I'm not making a smart selection, but because I'm going to be fans of both teams this week, I'm going to take both of them. And Dallas does have a bad record of going on the road.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, if the Giants beat the Eagles, if the Commanders beat the Cowboys, Detroit beats Minnesota, Detroit would be the number 2 seed in the NFC. So
And
I understand
honestly,
where you're coming from.
and guess what? I would actually, even if the Eagles won and got the second seed, but the Cowboys find a way to lose in Washington, I'd be a little upset, because I didn't get the second seed. But at the end of the day, it would still be a win-win because at least Dallas got the karma slapped in their face.
Yeah. Sunday night football is going to be the game of the day. It's for all the marbles in the AFC East division. The 11-5 Dolphins host the 10-6 Bills, and the Bills beat the Dolphins earlier in the year, but it was in Buffalo under the different offensive coordinator when both teams were fully healthy. I think that Buffalo can go into Miami and win the game the way they've been playing because they've been running the football a lot better. James Cook has become a focal point and weapon for Buffalo, and I think Buffalo goes into Miami and wins the game. I think Buffalo goes into Miami and wins the game, and they get the number 2 seed in the AFC, which means that the Dolphins and Tyreek Hill get to actually go to Kansas City and play the Chiefs, where Tyreek Hill wanted to go anyway, but they ended up going to Germany for the Dolphins-Chiefs game earlier in the year. But if the Dolphins win and the Bills lose, the Bills could be the 6th seed, or the Bills could be out of the playoffs altogether if, and I'll have to zoom out to look at the records. Okay, if we know Cleveland is in, it is between, so you got the Texans, which would be 10-7, or the Colts, which would be 10-7. The Steelers could be 10-7. So there's 3 teams right there that are 10-7, okay, that would also be 10-7 with Buffalo. Okay. One of them here, the Colts and the Texans, one of them is not going to be 10-7. And so that means that in order to figure out who it is that would get further along, we'd have to look at their records in the conference and in the division. And I don't have the standings, and I can't get online. You would have to do it, or it'll kick me off and we'll go crazy. Let's just look at the current playoff matchups in the NFL. That is something that I do have. Baltimore and San Francisco are, of course, the number 1 seeds in their respective conferences. As of right now, Cleveland will be playing at Jacksonville should Jacksonville win their game and cinch up the AFC South division. Buffalo, let's say they lose to Kansas, or they'll be against Kansas City as the 6th seed. Miami wins, they play Indianapolis as of now. However, if Indianapolis loses, the next team in is Houston, then Pittsburgh last. Okay, so it goes Indianapolis, Houston, Pittsburgh. And so, and then what would happen is if Buffalo lost to Miami, and if, let's say, Houston beat Indianapolis, I think that opens the door for, if Pittsburgh wins, it would be between Buffalo and Pittsburgh as far as who has the better conference record would be the team that would make the playoff.
I got it right here.
So there's a lot going on there. In the NFC, we're assuming Tampa Bay wins the division. They're probably going to play against the Philadelphia Eagles. The Rams right now would be going to Detroit, and Green Bay would be going to Dallas. So that's the current playoff matchups. And I'm happy if it ends up like this right now. Okay? If it ends up like this right now, I think it would be great because I think that you would see a Kansas City-Miami matchup in the second round. Kansas City would have to go to Miami. And I'm not going to call the winner of that game. But Cleveland, I think, can beat Jacksonville. And Cleveland at Baltimore, that is Joe Flacco returns to Baltimore with Cleveland for a chance to go to the AFC Championship game.
That would be awesome.
Okay. You got the Rams with Matt Stafford playing against Detroit, okay, in the first round of the playoffs. I think that Baker Mayfield could eliminate the Eagles in the first round. And, then you've got Green Bay going to Dallas. I think at home, Dallas is probably going to beat up on Green Bay. And so, you could get your Detroit-Dallas rematch in the divisional playoff round. And it would be the Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would go to San Francisco to play in the divisional round of that one.
Yep.
So, what do you think? What do you think would happen if these matchups went through?
I think Detroit could beat LA. I think we would beat LA.
Okay.
And then if you're right, Tampa Bay beats Philly, and say Dallas does a Dallas and one and done, and Green Bay sneaks in, that would be really nice.
Well, if Green Bay wins in Dallas, then Green Bay would have to go to San Francisco, and that would be Tampa Bay versus Detroit in the second round. Detroit would get a second playoff game at home.
That would be the best scenario for Detroit. But what I really see is I do believe Tampa can beat Philly with how they've been playing. But I believe Dallas would beat Green Bay. I still think Detroit would win, so that would leave San Francisco, Tampa, and Dallas in. So San Francisco would play Tampa, and then we would play Dallas.
I think there are 4 teams, looking at this, there are 4 teams in each conference that I believe today can win the Super Bowl. The teams in the NFC that can win the Super Bowl are San Francisco, Dallas, Detroit, and the Rams. In the AFC, it's Baltimore, Kansas City, Cleveland, and Buffalo. Those are the 4 teams in each conference, I think, that can win the Super Bowl.
You got Buffalo over Miami?
Do what?
You got Buffalo over Miami? I agree with you most part.
As far as a team that can win the Super Bowl, I think Buffalo is a better team than Miami. They may not win this week, but when you get in the playoffs, okay, I could see Buffalo beating Kansas City.
No, I could see that.
Listen, I could see Buffalo beating Kansas City. I could see Buffalo beating Baltimore. Okay, I can see them beating Kansas City, beating Baltimore. You got Cleveland versus, we'll call it Miami, which I think would be a slugfest. Okay, because I think the defense of Cleveland would beat up on those receivers for Miami. I think it would be a close game. I think that Miami would probably beat Cleveland, but they'd have to earn it, and then they just walk into a slaughter if they played against Baltimore again. But I think that it would be, if Miami won, it'd be Miami versus Buffalo for the third time, and Miami would host the game again.
Yeah. Because the only why I brought that up is just for Josh Allen in the season. It's either he's good or he's totally in left field. That's what scares me about Buffalo is Josh Allen just hasn't seemed to be his true self from years prior.
See, in my scenario, I think the winner of the 6-3 in the NFC between the Rams and Detroit, the winner of that game goes into Dallas and beats Dallas. That's what I think, that's what I would expect to happen. But the only problem is that I don't think the Rams could go to Dallas. I think if the Rams win, they would end up going to the 49ers. And so they have to go through the 49ers first before they got to Dallas.
Yeah, you're right.
Because it'd be like Tampa Bay at Dallas and the Rams at the 49ers, and then the Rams would play Dallas. And hell, that's a path for the Rams to make it to the Super Bowl, would be as they had to play against the 49ers because they match up so well against each other. You know, and
Yeah.
the Rams for a long time have had the upper hand in the head-to-head matchups. It's only been recently I think, two of the last three that the 49ers have beat the Rams.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You're right. That would be a crazy matchup, but we're hoping that. And now, if you want to look at the scenario, I pulled it up on my computer.
Yeah, just show me the standings. That's what I need.
Okay, the standings right now. So,
Conference record between, okay, Buffalo is ahead of Indianapolis, but they would, okay, so if Indianapolis won, they would go to 7, or they would go to 8-4. So they would move to 6.
and who was that?
If Buffalo loses, okay,
Okay.
Buffalo's conference record goes to 6-6.
Oh, okay, yeah.
If Houston wins, their conference record goes to 7-5, and Indianapolis goes to 7-5. And then Pittsburgh would go to 7-5. And then it would be head-to-head or divisional. I think if Buffalo loses, based on what I'm seeing here, if Buffalo loses, only Indianapolis or Houston, one of them two can win. Let's say Indianapolis wins because they have the better record, and Pittsburgh wins.
Yeah, you're right. Pittsburgh would get the last spot.
Pittsburgh would go in ahead of Buffalo.
Because the only other one, yeah, you're right. Because everybody else is 6-5. See, losing Baltimore's last game in their conference, or Denver's last game screwed them.
Buffalo needs to either win, or if they lose, they cannot have Houston beat Indianapolis, or they'll be out of the playoffs.
Okay, so if the Rams if Green Bay loses to Chicago, they would be 6-6. If Seattle wins, they'll be 7-5, take it, but even if they lose, they'll be 6-6. New Orleans would have to win to be 6-6. If they lose, they would be completely out of it. Minnesota would still have a chance if they pulled out a W.
No, but their overall record would be 8-9.
Yeah.
There's too many players. There's too many teams ahead of them.
And the Bears. Now the Bears beat Green Bay and go 7-5.
They would be 8-9. And
they would get it.
9. And they would be 8-9. No, they're not getting in.
Well, they're not getting in because they would need 1, 2, 3, 4. They would need all 4 teams to lose. So they would need Green Bay to lose. They would need Seattle to lose. They would need New Orleans to lose. And they would need Minnesota to lose. And they would have to win.
Well, we'll know all of the scenarios for sure Sunday night after the Sunday night football game. And so next Tuesday, we'll be back to review the season, and we can hand out awards at that time, who we think everybody, who the award winners should be, and we'll preview the playoffs.
Yes.
Looking forward to it.
I mean, ain't it crazy that this is our first season, first year of our broadcast, and it's already almost over already?
Well, we've been coming right along here. We'll have a sabbatical after the Super Bowl.
Yes, and then we'll definitely go over off-season schedules and everything. Season goes by too fast, boys and girls. way too fast. I'm excited for it, but the same part, I'm sad for it because I know playoffs even go faster because they're filled with more excitement.
Well, sorry as always for my technical difficulties, but thanks again for joining us here on the Fourth and Goal Sports Podcast. You can catch both me and Chris here again next Tuesday on Facebook, YouTube, and all our other streaming platforms. And you can see me Saturday on Picks with David on YouTube and Facebook. Thanks for joining us. Thanks again, Chris.
No problem, David. Remember, if you haven't liked to follow Fourth and Goal Sports, please do. As soon as you like and follow it, you'll get every notification every time we go live. I appreciate you guys turning in. Ron, no problem. I enjoy. You knew we were going there. We had a talk about the scenario Saturday in Dallas. So glad you got it off your chest. I know I feel better, honestly, talking about it because I didn't spend my time going back and forth in comment sections about it that much. But other than that, guys, I hope you guys had a happy New Year and Christmas. I'm glad to be back. And I can't wait for next week because the fun is about to start. We're going to see some of our predictions, what we predicted, if we were right or wrong for the preseason. And I can't wait to see what happens Sunday. I'm hoping something crazy happens. That'd be nice to see a team that you really thought didn't have a chance to get in there. I'm just glad I can read. The one thing I will say, even though it hurts getting screwed over last week, is it's nice to go into the final week of the playoffs not having to count on one win. Enjoy it, David. He finally
I
won
got
Pick'ems.
14 out of 16 right on the Pick'ems on NFL Renegades. Challenge me again this week.
It's the last week for it, so we'll see who gets to win it. All right, guys. Good night. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks, you guys, for tuning in. Later, guys. Good night.